Anthony Albanese has followed in the footsteps of former Prime Ministers, visiting the Great Wall as his tour of China continues. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts is travelling with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's right, Ros. The Prime Minister's trying to draw a very clear historic parallel here. Gough Whitlam came as opposition leader to this very part of the Great Wall. Anthony Albanese, more than 5 decades later, is now following in his footsteps. Of course, Gough Whitlam is famous for essentially taking the decision to say he'd recognise China in office. And that really opened up Australia's relationship in time with the People's Republic of China. Now, Anthony Albanese is keen to present himself as the inheritor of that tradition today. So he's been wandering the Great Wall, talking about the importance not just of Chinese history, but also to the importance of that Labor tradition of engagement, arguing that that's really bolstered the relationship between Australia and China and in some ways set the tone for much, or the foundations for much of Australia's contemporary prosperity. Let's take a listen to the Prime Minister speaking about some of these parallels not long ago.
I have the sense of history, following in the footsteps of the Labor Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, who was the first Prime Minister to visit here in 1973. It followed the correct decision that he made as leader of the Labor Party in 1971. And that was, of course, at the time when that was a controversial decision to recognise the People's Republic of China. Australia has benefited from that. It certainly is understood here in China that was an early decision and was a decision that took courage. You know, it has made a difference to the relationship.
So following yesterday's high-level meetings, China's leaders have called for Australia to take a stand against protectionism. Stephen, what's been the Prime Minister's response to that?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting situation that we're facing at the moment because Donald Trump, of course, has really upended global trade, and his so-called Liberation Day tariffs have caused enormous amounts of unease here in China, but also in Australia. Now, China clearly spots an opportunity here, hoping to coax Australia, not out of the US orbit as such, but to try and find common cause with the countries like Australia to try and cooperate more on trade, try and push back against the US in multilateral fora. I think we're going to see more of this sort of language from the Chinese. Anthony Albanese, for his point, trying not to get drawn directly into an argument, certainly not directly criticising the Trump administration whilst he's here in China. He's aware of what the optics of that would look like, but also saying that Australia stands for free trade. Let's take a listen to what the PM had to say.
I say the same thing in Beijing as I say in Bankstown, which is that the Australian government supports free and fair trade. It's in the interests of the world to have free and fair trade, and we'll continue to engage that way.